Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I think this is one of those series where even if you haven't actually sat down and played these games, I kind of feel like everyone at least knows about them. They blew up like crazy back in the day, helping popularize skateboarding in the mainstream, as well as making Tony Hawk an even bigger household name all around the world. It even got my guy Spyro jumping around on a skateboard for what that was worth. And yeah, these games went on for a long time, with plenty of highs and lows that someone with way more experience in playing them could tell you all about. I'm not one of those people, at least not yet anyway. I played quite a bit of Tony Hawk's American Wasteland when that came out, and I remember liking it, but that's about it really. Anything prior to that, I vaguely remember seeing my cousins play one of these Pro Skater games when I was growing up, but I have no idea which one, and I was always the youngest one there, you know, so I would usually get pushed aside when it was my turn to have a go on the PlayStation. Oh well. But now, I don't know, I'm just really in the mood to try all of this out. The remake bundle of Pro Skater 1 and 2 seemed to go down really well with fans of the series, and to this day, people still rave about these games, and I want in on that. I want to see what it's all about. I mean, these do look really fun, and I'm all about games with interesting movement systems, and this is the series I usually refer to as a joke whenever there's a cool combo-based movement system in a 3D platformer, but ironically, I've never actually played any of these, so yeah, I figured it was about time I did something about that. And yeah, I could stick in my copy of the 1 and 2 remake, but no, I really want to see what made this series so special and witness it grow into the massive deal I hear so many people talk about online. So let's grab the first one and see if the original game can still nail a trick or two. Alright, so going in and just hearing the sound of this old Activision logo is hitting me in the nostalgia pretty hard. I used to hear that thing a lot thanks to the Toy Story 2 video game. Anyway, yeah, we've got Neversoft. I really do like their logo here. I mean, of course I do, look at it, it's so cool. I mainly know these guys from that time they made a pretty decent Spider-Man game for the PS1. Eventually they went on to make a few Guitar Hero games as well, but that's never really been my kind of thing. And yeah, not a whole lot to look at here in the menus, but I do kind of know what I'm getting into here. I don't have a manual to read or anything like that, but I do remember the gist of the controls thanks to my time being a Wastelander. So yeah, I'll do the career mode. I don't really know who any of these people are, so I'm just gonna pick the Birdman himself and get rolling. First impressions are that the controls, yeah, they are a little stiff. It does take a while to get used to the general weight, speed, and how much flexibility this movement system has. For me, it took most of the career mode. I was almost done with the entire game before I got to grips with how it all felt. But yeah, once you get a feel for things, there's no denying that this game has its incredibly fun moments, in between the countless times you'll make Tony Hawk faceplant the floor along the way. While skateboarding is something that's very much done in the real world, I'd say these games kind of operate on their own plane of existence, taking a lot of the fundamental ideas of skateboarding, but instead of making a game that's realistic, we've got this faster paced, arcade-like presentation, and I'm really glad that that's the direction Neversoft took here. The controls and the way everything feels here is pretty much the entire reason I wanted to make a video about this game, because when it all clicks, man does it click. I know I usually talk a lot about 3D platformer games, but the more I play of this, the more I see things about that genre carrying right over into Pro Skater. You know how it is, you've got a character on screen that can move around their game world in a fun, engaging, and visually pleasing way, with some random things to find and collect around the level, and perhaps some of their moves stringing together in ways that are fun to pull off. Which, if you think about it, that's exactly what this game is all about too. Now, I'm not saying Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is a 3D platformer. I'm really not, because that would be stupid. Mr. 3D platformer man calling everything a 3D platformer, but I mean, it kind of feels like one at times, you know? It's definitely tickling that part of my brain that enjoys a good exploration-based 3D platformer, but this is obviously doing a lot of those ideas in a totally different way, and I don't know, I think that's pretty interesting to think about. Getting around on the skateboard itself is pretty easy. You'll automatically roll forward, but you can hold down the jump button to gain speed before letting it go to pop out right into an ollie and onto the next thing, which feels really good. And right away, the various ramps and pipes you use to get around seem like they've been done really well here. With how much momentum you can gain from these, it feels exactly like it should. If you go up one of these and the quarter pipe has a curved edge, then the game will know what it is you're trying to do and make your skater go around that curve to let you do your trick and move on. Not exactly realistic, no, but for the sake of gameplay, this is how it is and it feels really good. I mean, the fact these half pipes just kind of work with no jankiness on the entry and exit is really impressing me more than anything else. You know, I've played a few games on later systems where curved surfaces have this weird stiffness about them, basically ruining the entire idea right there in its tracks, but here, straight away within the first level, you're able to launch up and shoot out of these things no problem. Look at him go! And the speed you get from doing this feels great. I love going to the top of this area in the first level and using this ramp to gain some speed and then launch yourself across the massive half pipe below. It's so good. Tricks are easily done with just 2 button presses, a face button and a directional button, and that's it. Square for flips, circle for grabs, and triangle for grinds, but it's one of those setups that's easy to pick up and play around with, but a lot harder to master thanks to the option of being able to do more than one trick and a few mid-air rotations if you're feeling up to it. Not that I'm a master of this by any stretch, and I've got the footage to prove it. This extra layer to doing tricks thanks to the mid-air rotations is something that did take me a while to get used to, especially when I was prompted to use the L1 and R1 buttons to spin around even faster, which, I'm not gonna lie, this early into my pro skater career, that felt like way too much information to wrap my brain around whilst moving at this speed, so I mainly stuck to using the D-pad for this. Most of the time, spinning around whilst doing tricks isn't that much of a problem because of how the game handles landing. All you need to do is approach the ground with the board facing the right way. Obviously you can't land sideways, so you just have to point the wheels straight ahead. And yeah, my instincts for doing this came from Spyro 3, so, you know, that minigame has something going for it, I guess. A lot of the time, this is pretty simple to do whilst also doing a trick, because the vast majority of the trick poses have the board oriented the same way it would be if you weren't doing a trick at all. So a lot of the grab tricks are pretty easy to do, even with rotations, once you get used to your preferred method of spinning around. But I swear there's at least 2 or 3 of these tricks where the trick pose itself has the board in a slightly different orientation, and that is what throws me off. I've lost count how many times I've accidentally caved Tony Hawk's skull into the ground because of me thinking I'm about to land safely when I'm not. That is until I discovered completely by accident that you can just tap the back shoulder button to make the game do a 180-degree turn for you, with each press adding another 180 degrees mid-air, and just like that, holy shit, this became so much easier for me to get along with. I have no idea if this is frowned upon or looked down at for being the easy option within the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater community, but I am new here and the option is right there, so of course I'm gonna use it. I just wish one of those patronizing little messages popped up telling me about this sooner, because I was halfway done with the game by the time I discovered this. There's actually quite a few advanced little moves tucked away in here like that as well, that the game doesn't really tell you about, at least during gameplay, like using the D-pad fully when trying to turn around, because you can just turn like this if you want to, but if you also use the down arrow to slow down a bit, then the turning circle becomes almost non-existent, even when you're traveling at speed. After getting used to how the board handles on the ground, doing this to quickly turn into ramps and half pipes, or even doing a 180 and tricking off the same one a couple times in a row was great. Again, it's not realistic, but it does feel good, so whatever. but hands down, the best hidden feature here has got to be the option of jumping out of a wall ride, which itself is like a double layered enigma because I'm pretty sure the game never told me about wall riding in the first place. So yeah, if you press the grind button when hitting any wall at an angle, your skater will, you know, kind of ride along the wall for a second. But unbeknownst to me, for the vast majority of this game, a friend of mine showed me that you can actually jump out of this animation, effectively making it a hidden double jump mechanic within this skateboarding game, and holy shit, this thing is really useful. I'm still no master at using it, but good lord, did it become so much easier to reach spots that were difficult for me to reach up until then. The best example I have is this bonus token on top of a ledge within the school level. I know you can get up there by jumping off one of these ramps, but early on when I was still getting used to how everything felt, I was finding that a little difficult. I tried many times to do a fast plant off this ramp to get onto that ledge, but no. Turns out you can just get up there by friggin' double jumping with this weirdly elusive mechanic, and what do you know, I got up there without using the ramp on my first try. It really is that easy once you know it's there. Another advanced thing you can do is to incorporate special tricks into your moveset, which you can only pull off once you've built up your special meter. Yeah, this is another one of those things that's a kind of iconic part of the Pro Skater series, but as far as the first game is concerned, I barely used it. What can I say? I was still learning the ropes and I found doing this a little too difficult alongside just generally keeping up with the game as I played it, but on the odd occasion I did somehow accidentally pull off one of these special moves. It was pretty cool. You've gotta love that sound effect. Overall, I do think the learning curve here is a little steep for a newcomer like me, especially when you have to put your skills to the test in a competition level. And in hindsight, it is a little weird for me to go this far back into the series and realise that there was never a balance meter when grinding. Yeah, you just have to kinda judge it by eye. But anyway, with each 2-minute session I played, I did feel like I was genuinely getting better at everything the game was asking of me. Before I knew it, I was going further and further and taking longer and longer between inevitably smashing Tony Hawk's face into the floor. Speaking of which, you are definitely going to get used to using this button combo, start, down, and X. If you press those buttons in that order, you'll restart your 2-minute timer and give yourself another go. It's quick, easy, and within an hour, I had this committed to muscle memory to the point where it's almost instantaneous. It's like... I even screwed myself over a few times because of how easy it is to do this. I had a pretty good run going except for one mistake, and then I just instinctively pressed start down X at lightning speed and ruined all of my good work in less than 1 second. God damn it! That's no complaint towards the game, by the way, it's just me being way too trigger happy with this thing to begin with. It's a useful and very welcome option to have, but yeah, you've really got to resist the urge to be a perfectionist here. Just do what you gotta do and roll with it. Anyway, the main goal here for me was to just clear the career mode at least once so I can say I've seen what it's all about, tick it off my mental to-do list, and get on with the rest of my life. So yeah, let's check it out. Outside of doing the occasional free skate session, career mode is where you'll probably spend most of your time, with this being the mode you play to unlock new levels, extra characters to play as well as skateboarding clips to check out, and because of that, it's easily the mode with the most things to do. Every main level is given a handful of goals that you need to clear in order to earn a VHS tape, and to get your hands on these you'll have to do various things like reaching a certain score, finding or breaking a set of specific objects, collecting letters that spell out the word skate, and finding the bonus tape hidden somewhere in that level. Some of these goals are specific to each level, and others are basically standardized throughout the entire game. In fact, most of the level specific goals are just variations of the same idea, but everything is themed to match each level that it's in, and for the most part, none of the goals were overly complicated to understand, which is good. You get a brief rundown of what it is you need to do during the loading screen, and then you just get on with it. The key thing is actually being able to complete these goals on time, because for each level you are given a 2-minute timer for every session, and I remember from the very brief times I had to go with some of these earlier Pro Skater games as a kid that I always used to find that timer to be really stressful, especially because I didn't really get a chance to learn how to play these games in the first place. But these days, I do actually think the timer for this mode is a very good thing, because it gives this game a bit of much needed structure. And of course, you don't need to clear all of these goals in one single run. Sure, you can try to do that if you like, but there's absolutely no need to stress about it. And for me, this kind of ended up being perfect. I'd use a couple of runs to get a lay of the land, spot where things were, and maybe try and get a couple of the high score tapes, and then the rest of the time I'd just hone in on trying to do whatever it was I had left to do. And it's when I was doing that and trying to clear all of these goals, combined with my natural 3D platformer man urge to do a clean sweep of every level I come across along the way, that the true addictive nature of this game kicked in. It is very hard to put the controller down when you're so focused on clearing these goals. When that timer reaches 0, you know, my brain just goes, oh well, it's only another 2 minutes if I decide to give it another go, so I'll give it another go. And then before you know it, it's 1:30 AM and you're questioning every life decision you've ever made that's led up to this point, with the main one being, how the hell did it take me so long to play this game? This is pretty good. Once again, I've got to say, I'm really glad Neversoft went in the direction of a more arcade-like game with how everything is handled here. You know, you gotta think less Gran Turismo and more Mario Kart when it comes to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, from the way tricks are done, but also with the way the game judges those tricks with the combo-based scoring system. Each trick is worth a certain amount of points, and the grab tricks can be worth more if you hold that trick mid-air when doing a jump. But the real method of scoring big is when you do multiple tricks to string them together into a combo. Doing this not only adds the other tricks to your score total, but you'll also get a multiplier for however many moves you manage to do in one go. Now, I do know from my time with American Wasteland that this series really doubled down on this aspect and got a lot better at it at some point in the future, but I don't really know when, so for now, yeah, this is pretty basic. You can't do a whole lot in one combo, but you can still usually do maybe 3 or 4 tricks in a row for a pretty decent score. You can then go even further if you chain together different types of grinds on a longer rail, and if you stumble across a gap, which I guess would be like, you know, something you'd brag and feel really cool about in real life if you actually managed to do it. You know, things like jumping over a half pipe, or doing a trick over a kicker ramp, or landing from somewhere really high up. If you do manage to do one of these things, you'll hear a special sound effect, get given a bunch of points, and again, if you combine those with doing other tricks, you can easily triple or quadruple what they'd normally be worth, and the same can be said for these bonus point tokens too. Progressing through the career mode is gradual, with more levels being unlocked thanks to those VHS tapes you collect along the way. So you complete the goals to get the tapes, and then the tapes unlock extra levels. It's as simple as that. There is a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to completing goals here, but not a lot. Towards the end, I personally could have done with a little bit more breathing room to unlock that final level, but you know, I kept at it and I got there in the end. Most of the levels here aren't too bad either, and there's a pretty decent selection of themes with the warehouse, the school, the shopping mall, a skate park, downtown, Downhill Jam, Burnside, San Francisco's streets, and Roswell's very own Area 51. All of these come in different shapes and sizes, and they all have their own set pieces to set them apart from one another, and I did end up liking most of the levels here, although I will say I prefer the medium-sized, open-ended ones. The Burnside competition area in particular just seemed way too small to me, and I get that this is based on a real location, but at this point, it's pretty well established that this game is being the wacky Mario Kart version of a skateboarding game, so having this realistically scaled smaller skate park here doesn't really work for me in terms of the gameplay. On the other hand, we've got the San Francisco Streets level, and while I did like this one a little bit more after figuring out some of its secrets, it's just kind of big and empty at times. There's a lot of dead open space here in between the places you can do tricks, and with a level this big, that 2-minute timer feels a lot shorter than it normally does. You've also got a couple of these linear downhill courses, which, you know, they're okay, I guess. I'm not as big a fan of these compared to the more open-ended ones, mainly because if you do happen to reach the end of the level, then that's it, you're just done. It doesn't matter if you had time left over to spare, you're just kicked out. But out of the linear courses, if I had to pick one, then I'd say I prefer the shopping mall over the downhill jam level because, I don't know, I just think shopping malls can be a pretty cool video game set dressing. And the very final level of the game, being Area 51, was a pretty good one too. Yeah, it is a fairly basic skate park, but the metallic ramps make a different sound when you roll around on them, and there's all sorts of cool stuff here, like a UFO, and even an actual alien.
Incompetent fool. I should never have sent you.
As you go through the career, every few levels you'll have to enter a competition where you're given 3 rounds of 1-minute sessions to do any tricks you like to try and impress the judges. I'll be honest, I wasn't super into these because there's not a lot to them, and without the variety of having different goals to complete, they just didn't feel as fun to do, even if the level layouts here are pretty good. Well, for the most part anyway. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of Burnside, but what you gonna do? This was also the part of the game where I had to give up the idea of doing a clean sweep throughout the entire career mode because the second and third competitions were really difficult. Well, you know, to me, someone who's actually new to this series, I was trying that last competition in Roswell over and over again for an hour, and yes, this is the part of the game that kept me awake until 1:30 AM. And yeah, I did have to kind of find and cheese a few of the gaps over and over again to boost my score, and even then, I was only able to just about scrape by with a bronze medal. But you know what? It counts. I did it! I rolled credits and I finished the career mode. Yes! When I beat that final competition, even with my measly bronze medal, I could have ran outside into the street, naked, done a backflip, and then screamed into the night sky to let all know of my glorious victory. But, you know, it was 1:30 AM, and I didn't want to wake anybody up. And I probably would have got cold, so I didn't do any of that. I just kept it to myself. I felt pretty good though. After clearing the career mode, the real goal is to get all of the gold medals, which I genuinely don't think I'm gonna be able to do, and on top of that, the idea back then was to clear the career 100% as every single skateboarder to unlock more video footage of them doing their thing, but I'm not gonna do that. You can just put a cheat code in if you want to see those videos anyway, and as far as the gameplay is concerned, I'm happy enough to just leave it there. And so that is Tony Hawk's skateboarding, pro skater boarding, yeah, whatever. Regardless of its name, it's a pretty good game. There's no doubt that this is going to beat the ever-living shit out of whoever you choose to play as for a while when you start out, which does turn into pure frustration at times. The downhill jam level is where I really started to get pissed off with everything, but pushing through and getting to grips with this control scheme to see what you can do with it to move around and do these cool tricks is so much fun. It's like I said earlier on, this obviously isn't a 3D action platformer, but the way you move around with every button having its own very important role to play in the overall moveset, and everything being pushed along by that sense of momentum that you get by just being good at the game. I don't know, just as a fan of 3D action platformers, this is kind of doing a lot for me. Like, this is good, I like this. Overlaid on top of everything else is the licensed soundtrack, which is also pretty good, and it definitely fits in with the overall mood and vibe that Neversoft were going for with all of this. But I'm not really one for talking about music in great depth, so that's pretty much all I'm ever going to have to say about this. As for improvements, well, maybe a little bit more wiggle room with the level goals and scores required to not suck at the competitions would be nice, but you know, that could just be a me issue. I am new here after all. Then we've got the combo system. I do think this is pretty good, but it will be even better once it gets fleshed out a little bit more. But I have no idea which game in the series really spearheaded that, so it'll be interesting to see how it grows as time goes on. I also think it would be nice if there was just a little bit more to do, because outside of the career mode and then replaying the career multiple times as different skaters, I don't really see a whole lot else to do here. There is multiplayer if you're not sat on your own like I am, and the free skate mode is an option, but with none of the objectives and it being its own separate thing you have to load into from the main menu, I just don't really see the point of using this that much. I mean, it is nice to just play around and learn the level layouts without the timer, I guess, but if you accidentally do something here that would normally help you make progress, it's not really gonna count, so yeah, I didn't really use this very much. It was kinda handy for getting practice in for the San Francisco hidden tape location though, and gathering footage of the Roswell level, but that's about it. But even then, the complaint of not having any more modes to play around with is kind of a moot point, because I do feel like I got what I wanted out of this, with a short, arcade-styled game to play that lasted me just under 6 hours thanks to the career mode alone, and I'm pretty happy with that. So yeah, that's me discovering Tony Hawk's skateboarding for the first time. Better late than never, I guess. And yeah, although it wasn't a 3D action platformer, the movement mechanics here are so much fun to play around with and discuss, and I'm all about that. So yeah, I'm definitely going to carry on this journey and check out Pro Skater 2. But before I do that, I might just give this one more try.